3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Davidthedogtrainer podcast, episode
66.
66. This is an awkward one. Josh and I are sitting on the same side because we have our first virtual guest.
Yes.
So this could be starting at any time from now to any point in the future.
We don't know when.
It's 10:30. We'll be waiting for our guest to start here in just a moment.
Yes.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah. How are you, man?
Good. How are you guys?
Good.
Good.
David, nice to meet you. This is Josh, my co-host here.
Hey, how you doing?
What's up, Josh? Kiba, nice to meet you both.
You
Yeah,
as well,
you
man.
too.
So, yeah, super pumped that you were able to make it on. So we'll kind of get right into things here. So, obviously, we found each other just via Instagram. Obviously, you shot me a message just kind of talking about one of the videos that I posted, and I think it sparked some really interesting conversation that'd be cool to kind of discuss a little bit. I've since seen your name pop up on a couple of different pages. I saw you on the Larry Crone live the other day, I believe. So I thought that would be something interesting to discuss as well, as I think that as we were chatting a little bit, and I was kind of seeing some of your posts that you've been posting and everything, I think we agree on quite a few things. I think we have very similar opinions on a lot of dog training related topics and stuff. So, yeah, hopefully this turns into a cool discussion. I really appreciate that, even though, you know, obviously there's some things that we disagree with, that, again, you're cool with hopping onto the podcast and chatting about some of this stuff, because I've invited in the last, 6 months, so many people onto the podcast to talk with me that have just miscellaneously sent me messages about any number of things, and pretty much everybody has declined or given me some sort of ridiculous reason they couldn't do it. So,
I mean, some people are comfortable kind of airing opinions.
Yeah, for sure.
In today's day and age, what you say can bite you in the ass later, but it's at the end of the day, I think we all grow from good conversation, you know?
100%. So why don't you kind of give us a little bit of background on yourself? So are you in the New York area?
Yeah, I'm in Brooklyn.
Awesome. Very cool. Yeah, so why don't you kind of introduce yourself, let us know what you're all about, and start there.
Sure. So, you guys know me now, Kiba, Kirabel. I started dog training professionally in 2016. I had moved out to New York for college. There was a local trainer here in Brooklyn that I informally did an apprenticeship under. I was just working with him here and there, helping him out, not getting paid, but I love dogs. Prior to that, I had just been dog walking, dog sitting, and dog training with dogs I could get my hands on, just hey, I could help your dog walk or do this, whatever. But that was my first real exposure to proper dog training with structure, with some science behind it. It was actually him at that time who introduced me to Larry Crone, who was really putting out a lot of content on YouTube. I mean, I think he's probably been the most generous in terms of just stuff that was being put out for free on YouTube. So I started kind of absorbing a lot of his content, a lot of other YouTube trainers over the years, and kind of implementing it into dogs I could get my hands on locally. As time went on, so over the next couple of years, I started getting a little bit better, getting a little more dogs on my hands. It was all part-time for the first couple of years. And then about sophomore, junior year of college is when I really started to put in serious time, Mm-hmm. I mean, outside of school, that's all I was doing. And then by the end of my college career, I was pretty much working full time as a dog trainer. Still had other gigs to make ends meet and stuff, but dog training was paying my bills,
Yeah.
And then as graduation neared, I was like, do I go all in on this, or so I studied economics.
Mm-hmm.
I got into grad school for econ, and, my family immigrated to the US. So, they obviously were pushing, of course you got to go to grad school, you got to do this. And, but I really enjoyed dog training. And at the same time, I had seen the potential financially to be able to support myself. And so, it was literally within the last couple of months of senior year, I was just like, you know what, I can always go to grad school, but if I stop and I really just stop dog training, I don't know how easy it'll be to like get myself back into it fully again.
Yeah, you definitely need some momentum, initially as you're getting started with it.
Yeah, especially as when it's, as a small business, it's not easy to just, stop and then start again. I think.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you.
They say the same about school, to be fair. They say the same. Once you leave school, it's not easy to get, I think with anything, once you leave it, it's not so easy to get back into it.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of just put all the chips in. I had always gone to this local groomers because they have a self-service. So I would take my dog there, pay $30 and do my whole grooming. And I remember one day kind of going down to the basement area to use their bathroom when I was there. And this was like towards the end of my senior year.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that the space was just not used. They kind of just had a bunch of storage and stuff. So I talked to the owner. She was really cool. And I basically made a partnership deal with them. And within a couple of months of graduation last year, I just graduated last year. Within a couple of months, we renovated the whole space, turned it into a training facility. And since then, I've just been all in with the business.
Yeah,
it's been a really cool past year. I was I finally got the facility up and running. I hired another trainer about 6 months ago now.
Yeah.
So now we're full on running with it.
Yeah. So what kind of services are you currently offering? Is it just like lessons and stuff that you're doing there, like board and trains?
So we do board and trains, we do private lessons, and then we do boarding for clients that have finished training with us. So anybody who's finished the training program, they can do like an enrichment boarding where if they travel or whatever, their dog stays with us and we maintain training while just boarding them with us.
Yeah, that's the one thing I've always thought really interesting about a lot of the trainers in New York. Like obviously, I'm sure you know Blake out there.
Right.
It was funny as I was like looking through your page and stuff. Like, I was seeing a lot of the videos you were posting about like doing work in your apartment and stuff like that. And it reminded me a lot of, I remember when I first discovered Blake, like when I was starting to get into this like 10 years ago or so. It was like he was doing everything out of his little apartment, and he'd have crates all over the place, and he'd be just grinding to get it done. And I couldn't even imagine the hurdle of out there trying to find spaces so not readily available as is. And then I remember the first time I ever went to Blake's place, I was like, you see it in the videos and stuff, and it looks like a normal sized place, and then you walk inside and you're like, holy shit, this is small. And
everything out here is, man. Everything out here is.
Yeah, it's so cool though, because like, what you're able to get accomplished in such a small space. When I was first getting into training, like Blake and Tyler and like, Jeff and Sean and Larry and all them, they were kind of like the big names in the industry at the time. And I remember Tyler, because he's pretty close to me. He's in Buffalo, so he's only like 3 hours away. Tyler was like kind of my mentor when I first started getting into training, and I would go up there and he was like, man, he's like, Blake, he's like, if there's one thing that dude can do, it's manage a very small space with a lot of dogs in it. Like he said, he had Blake come up when they used to do like a seminar series together, and he would have Blake come up and like work with his staff and just like show them like basically the most efficient ways to work with like multiple dogs in a small space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tight.
I mean, when I was working out of my apartment, I only did like 2 dogs boarding.
Sure.
That.
Yeah.
I tried to limit how much dogs I was boarding. I did a lot more private sessions.
Yeah.
But the thing about New York is, I mean, there's a lot of parks and they're pretty dog friendly, and so I know in the dog training world, there's a big taboo against dog parks and against, stuff like that. But being out here, you have to kind of work with that, because that's what people have, like people don't have yards. People don't have a lot of space that they can utilize. You have to be able to work in public spaces, be able to accommodate hectic noises and situations happening all the time, and be able to kind of flow with that. I think it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. I think a lot of the dogs in cities like this tend to generally be way more socialized, way more stable, because they're having to deal with this from the time they're They're with their families,
Yeah. I mean, there's no escaping the environmental side of things, you know. So like you get into like the most environmentally like bomb-proof dogs. You're going to find them in those places. I used to do a lot of training in Chicago. I was considering moving out there and opening a location. So I would go out there like once a month and like do a weekend of lessons. And it was crazy to see the difference in issues and things that people would reach out to me over there versus in like, Cleveland, which is a city, but like it's primarily composed of a bunch of suburbs,
Right.
So completely different issues. So that's really cool. Yeah. And even stuff like, like you were saying, using the space that you have to your advantage and working with the imperfect situations. Like I made a post the other day. Cleveland has been going through this ridiculous like growth spurt where we've been having all these like huge apartment buildings pop up everywhere and stuff like that. And that's been showing itself to create a lot of new issues with dogs moving from these suburban areas to these condensed apartment buildings and stuff, and needing to deal with things like, elevators, dogs in the hallway, and kind of some of the territorialness that like comes with all those different types of things. And I just don't think people here or the dogs here are used to that yet, so it's creating a lot of new hurdles that we're as a company experiencing as people are reaching out to us over them. So, so really interesting.
Makes sense. What are the biggest things you guys deal with down there? Out of curiosity with dogs.
Yeah, a lot of dog aggression issues. I think that, I've seen a trend, obviously as the world has become like more dog friendly and people are taking their dogs more places and this and that, we're seeing a ridiculous amount of reactivity issues, obviously, because we're packing all of these dogs into breweries and patios and I mean, I do a trivia league every Monday at a brewery, and there's times that there's like 6 or 7 dogs in a space that's like as big as this attic that I'm in right now, and it just creates just pure chaos. And then on top of that, you can't go anywhere without people just like, and this is probably the cool thing that's probably opposite about in your case, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no respect to people will just run up to your dog and pet them all the time and do things to them. And I know that happens everywhere, but Cleveland is in these more suburban areas. It's more like okay to just be like a part of what everybody else is doing. Where I feel like in New York or Chicago or these bigger cities, there's less of that community aspect to things, and everybody kind of just does their own thing. So we see a lot of we see a lot of like like dog bites and stuff like that, just resulting from poor social exposure like that. So a lot of behavioral stuff, a lot of anxiety and things like that, that's really, I think, where every dog trainer is starting to realize the big hole is, pretty much anybody could teach the dog to do all their basic commands and sit down and stay and do all that good stuff. But, owners are having a hard time understanding their dogs, and dogs are having a really hard time learning how to interact with their environments, with other people, and with other dogs. So we've really, in the last, I would say, 4 years or so, really dove down that path of me trying to experiment and figure out like, why are people having such a hard time finding those results, and why are trainers having such a hard time finding the success with those things, so a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I think that in a city like this, trainers have a lot of flexibility with what they want to do.
Sure.
Reality is there are too many dogs and not enough trainers, at least in a city like New York, if you want to just be a trainer that wants to focus on just puppies and just do basic obedience and puppy work, you can do that. If you want to find your niche in aggression and anxiety cases, you can do that. If you want to, there's definitely, it's super, there's a lot of dogs, and so the flexibility is cool, but I've actually personally gone down a very similar path in terms of working with a lot of aggression and anxiety cases. That's kind of the niche that I put myself in over the last 2, 3 years, especially, but it's, for me, it's super rewarding and interesting. It's like every dog presents its own unique challenges and even with obedience, not to discredit obedience, basic obedience work. I mean, it's the foundation for anything. But I think a lot of behavioral cases tend to be more, for me, interesting and stimulating. And so that's what I've been doing most of.
Yeah. So interesting question to that. So I have this weird opinion that dog trainers that are choosing to say, I don't want to work with behavioral cases, unless let's separate like sport dog stuff and like rally obedience and agility. Let's separate all that for a minute. Let's look at just like pet dog training. People that are saying like, oh, I don't work with behavioral stuff, right? I just do obedience training. I feel like that is almost being a little bit oblivious to the fact that everything is behavioral training, right? Like, unless you're looking for, like I said, to just go do agility with your dog or go do rally obedience with your dog or just go have fun with them in a new way and stimulate them, people are hiring dog training or dog trainers to either stop some sort of behavioral issue or to avoid running into behavioral issues later on, right? So to eliminate that side of your brain and say, we're not even going to think about the behavioral stuff doesn't allow you to successfully do that. It doesn't allow you to successfully make sure you're setting up that puppy that you're working with for success, where 6 months down the road, 8 months down the road, a year down the road, when they start going through maturity, those fear aggression issues don't start popping up, or that reactivity issue doesn't start presenting itself, et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah. I think it's I think you'll see that with a lot of beginner trainers. And I think it's a natural evolution too. And if it gets too loud, by the way,
you're fine. You're fine.
But I mean, even looking at my journey in the beginning, right, I was very focused on behaviors. Yeah. And when I say that, I mean like commands and obedience and being able to get a dog to sit down, stand, walk nicely, whatever, and very focused on the actual actions of the dog and the animal versus, okay, what is really going on at a deeper level? How can we get the dog to be a willing participant? And that was simply stemming from my lack of experience and knowledge. And like I would YouTube stuff. I had my puppy when I was 19. I learned, okay, cool, I can lure behaviors and make this happen. And I figured out how to fade luring, and now I can just make the dog do on verbal cues. And so I'm a dog trainer, right?
Sure.
And I think a lot of people go through that whole journey. It's
it's like a lack of awareness of like,
I can go back 4 or 5 years and like, give those clients what I can do now. I would do so heartbeat, but it was a natural progression that I had to go through from this cookie cutter solution to really dynamically thinking and addressing each individual dog and client for what they really need. And that's not just monkey see, monkey do. It's being able to actively think and adjust. And so it's I think that for trainers who are in that place right now, those that really love it and love working with dogs, I think will naturally make that next stage come where they now start to think about a lot more than just, okay, I want X behavior to happen, and versus how can I really work at letting the client know how to, really work with this other living being and have an outcome that both parties are happy with. And it's not about obedience, right? It's really about living in harmony together. So, but I totally get what you're saying. And you're right. You can't really separate the two, especially in the pet training world. I say pet training world. I think you can't separate the two in sport world either. But it's especially with your everyday owner, very important to structure things better than that. And it's not even so much like I think, like you were saying, like newer trainers have to go through that progression of, you have to learn the mechanics first. You have to learn like, how do animals learn, right? How do I shape behaviors? How do I lure? How do I use leash pressure? How do I use the e-collar? How do I use food, et cetera, et cetera? And most of that is done through the actual training stages of the dog, right? Like you're teaching the dog these different behaviors, and then you become more aware of the subconscious things that you're doing with your dog and how you're living with your dog. And overall, past these obedience commands, like, why is my dog so good with me, right? Like,
I tell people all the time, like, my goal with dog training is to have to micromanage them as little as possible. I don't want to have to be doing commands. I don't want to have to be doing sits and downs and this and that past just mentally stimulating them. I'll go, days without ever asking a command out of my dogs because they understand the boundaries. They're provided a certain level of mental stimulation through different activities that we do. And they fit into my lives just perfectly that way, So, question: do you ever do like virtual sessions or anything like that with people?
Yeah, not as much anymore, especially during the pandemic. Though.
Yeah,
I was definitely doing virtual sessions. I'm from Chicago.
Yep.
So I actually was having a good amount of people that I knew back in the Shy hitting me up for sessions and stuff, but. Mm-hmm. I've been so busy with in-person stuff that I haven't done a virtual session in quite a while now.
Yeah, and especially getting the facility off the ground. So I used to stay away from them like the plague. Especially when everybody started doing them like with COVID and stuff like that. I really tried to stay away from them as best as possible because I liked that kind of hands-on approach. And part of it is I just had been doing it for so long, I didn't want to divert away from it. But I've started in the last year and a half, I would say, I started experimenting with them here and there as one-off follow-up sessions for people because we get a lot of board and trains from out of state. And to provide follow-up support for them, I would do some virtual Zoom classes with them or FaceTime sessions or things like that. And I was finding myself every single time I would do one of them, I was finding myself not even looking at the dog, just having a really great hour-long conversation with the person, as far as all of the things we're discussing right now, which is living with the dog and, making minor adjustments to the structure in their house and just getting them to understand the concepts better, Mm-hmm. And so that got me kind of thinking, well, let me experiment with, as we're building this social media following and stuff like that, let me experiment with throwing some people some, on the house Zoom calls and stuff like that from wherever and just see what I can get done with them. And, we've been doing them a lot more. We've started charging for them. I'm doing probably 1 or 2 a week at this point. And I'll tell you, without even knowing these dogs, without even working with them, the amount of progress we're able to get people to make from that standpoint of just, again, understanding their dog and understanding how to prevent issues. We're really trying to push those a lot more lately because it's just further pushing that point of the training, right? The command work, all that kind of stuff is such a small percentage of this. Yes, you need to have some degree of that, right? You have to be able to manage the dog in some scenarios where, even if they wouldn't be doing anything incorrect, I need you to get out of the way for a minute, or I need you to go lay over here for a minute, or whatever it may be. But more importantly than that, people need to know how to live with their dogs. So, they've been really cool. And that's where, again, pushing
I agree. Oh, yeah, with my experience.
Go ahead. Can you hear me?
No, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just going to say,
I can hear you.
And that's just pushing the point that, of the last, like I said, 3 or 4 years of shifting from kind of that obedience mentality to more of that kind of socialization and exposure and owner training side of things. It's just an interesting progression. And it's something we've found a lot of rewarding feelings coming from, for sure. So.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I agree.
So with that,
you guys work together, by the way, out of curiosity, are you guys working together as trainers?
No. So Josh actually, we've been working together now for 5 years, something like that, almost. So Josh has been my media guy for 5 years. So he used to work at the facility and basically would follow us around with a camera and film and take video and stuff like that. And he does his own independent contracting and stuff now for media for all sorts of companies, but he still does. When I started the podcast just over a year ago, I reached out to him because he's been around dogs so much that he has a very interesting perspective, from an owner that knows more than your average owner side of things on dog training and things like that.
I'm basically the layman's explanatory person, this is what he kind of means, so yeah.
Yeah, so it's cool. When we do episodes together and stuff like that, I'll rant on a subject and then he'll basically take it and be like, "This is actually what he means."
Yo, we all need that, honestly, right?
Yeah.
I catch myself all the time when I'm talking to clients.
Yeah,
you know what? I could just make this so much simpler,
Yeah.
But it's that's still
It's also another one of those struggles because it's like we could make it so much more simple. And I do adjust like my verbiage and the things I say to the clients I'm working with to make it as relatable as possible to them. But at the same time, you could fall into a trap of dumbing it down too much where it like defeats the concept of what the point you're trying to get across. And then you watch some of these trainers that are enormous online sensations or these new trainers that are blowing up on TikTok or whatever it may be. And you listen to them talk about these topics, and I understand it's for the client, right? It's for the person, but some of the things they're saying at this point are so dumbed down that they're wrong. It's like that is like not like scientifically accurate what you're saying anymore. So it's a tricky juggle.
I think a lot of people need to give clients more credit and not treat them like children,
100%. Yeah. 100%.
The reality is people get it, at least in my experience, people get it. Yeah. You don't need a lot of, you don't need a lot of deep scientific breakdown and terminology doesn't necessarily need to be the focus of like, I don't give a shit if my owner can tell me exactly what, the 4 quadrants are by term.
Sure.
But if they understand how they work and how they operate, okay, give something my dog likes, take away something my dog likes. Yeah. Give something my dog doesn't like, take away something my dog doesn't like. It's really not that hard for clients to get it. And I actually, one of the things that I'm about to launch right now is like a group class, but not like just having a bunch of dogs and clients doing whatever, but having like a structured group class where the first session is just theory breakdown on whatever the topic is. Like no dogs, first class is pure theory and just me and the clients kind of understanding what we're going to do. And then the next 2 sessions in group settings, having the clients work on these things, whether it's like leash etiquette, whether it's like applying markers and building commands that the dogs don't know at all, like whether it's a spin, something that the dog has never been exposed to, and understanding, okay, how can I build new behaviors and help the dog have clarity in what I'm trying to communicate. These things are, I think every client has easily the capacity to understand and perform. It's one of the things that I'm personally am not a big fan of, is dumbing it down so much that it's just like, okay, 10 minutes a day, go and, say yes and just throw a treat and you're good. It's like, but you don't know why or what.
I'll hear that a lot where it's like, we watched I don't even know. We watched some video recently and they were like talking about doing training. They're like, get them to do this. And when they do it, tell them yes. And it's like, well, just telling them yes, like why am I telling them yes? How does the dog know what yes means, right? How is it actually rewarding the behavior? When do I give the treat? What does it mean after? You know what I mean? Like there's so many variables outside of just that where it's like it's too simple. It just doesn't make sense at that point. So
I think he's frozen.
Oh, are we frozen? Oh crap. Oh no.
We should be able to get him back.
Hang on. We'll give it one more second here.
All right.
Oh, crap. Nope, he's gone. I wonder if he can come back. All right, guys.
You should be able to.
Try this one more time.
I guess invite, right?
All right, just sent the invite again. Let's see if we can get him back here. Oh, Jesus Christ.
It was going so well, too, so far.
I know. I wonder if it's... Oh, here we go.
There he is. Let's see what happens.
Can't hear us yet. Oh. There we go.
There we go. So my my iPad overheated. I didn't realize this one was that hot.
No problem.
Sorry about that.
All right.
I just came back alive, but I'm with you guys. You were saying, though.
Yeah. No, I was just talking about, we were watching a video and they were talking about, like you were saying, like the yes marker, right? And they were doing something with the dog and they're like, oh, when they do it correct, just tell them yes, right? And it's like, well, then what, right? Like, what does that mean? How does the dog perceive that as rewarding, this, that? So, yeah, no, I'm with you. I think I do think that owners can understand a lot more than we give them credit for. And I think a lot of cases, if they don't get it, it's not that they don't get it. It's that they don't care about that aspect of things because you're not making it relate to what their end goal is. You know what I mean? Every client, I always say, has like their pain point with things of like, there's something they hired you for, right? Yes, sure, there's those handful of clients that could just be like lazy and don't want to do anything and stuff like that. But I experience so few of those at this point because I think that, again, regardless of the person's status, how much money they have to throw at training, this, that, there's always something they want to be able to do better with their dog, right? And if you could figure out a way to relate the important stuff directly to that, they're going to care about it, you know?
Definitely.
So yeah, no, I think we're on the same page with all that for sure.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, kind of starting to relate things a little bit into that socialization post here. So you have your facility now that you kind of have been renovating and stuff like that. You said you've had for about a year or so now, and up until
a little less. About so it was October that we actually opened up with so it'd be 6 months, something like that.
Yeah,
October, November, January.
That's cool. And has that
7 months?
Has that facilitated you? So how have you been doing a lot of your socialization up until this point? I know you mentioned dog parks and stuff.
Yeah. A lot of. I mean, the thing is you stand on any New York City street, you're gonna pass at least 10 dogs within 30 minutes. You know? You're gonna pass. I don't know how many people. I don't know how many dogs. I don't know how many squirrels, pigeons. Like the environment that I have just being outside is incredible. So for several years, socialization was as easy as just going outside. Even now, my facility is honestly primarily used like as a sterile environment. It's my aquarium where I can really make a distractionless environment to build new stuff. I don't use it to socialize that heavily.
I understand.
If I have dogs that are extremely anxious, extremely aggressive, whatever the case may be, it becomes fantastic for socialization because I can control so much. Yeah, for sure. But outside of that, I've never struggled really with appropriately socializing my dogs.
Is there as much of a need/want for true like dog on dog interacting off leash socialization in New York? That's something that kind of just crossed my mind this morning as I was thinking about it. Because like it's not like everybody has backyards they're doing play dates. Obviously they have the parks and stuff, you know. But there's like it doesn't feel like there would be as many situations where stuff like that would be going on outside of that.
I mean, every single day. If you between 8 and 9 a.m. go to any New York City dog park, you're probably going to see a bunch of dogs just running together. You know, like it's I think a very, very big part of dog owners' lifestyle in the city is, and in my opinion, unfortunately so, because it becomes to the detriment of the dog, this thing where they're kind of just the norm becomes, okay, I'm going to take my dog to the park. Yeah. Everybody else who lives in this apartment that they can't do shit with is just going to take their dogs to the park in the morning. The dogs are going to kind of do whatever they want with each other. And then we walk back and life goes on. And middle of the day, dogs might get another walk. And then end of the day, because between 9 p.m. and 9 a.m., between those hours, most New York City parks allow off leash. Yeah. Interesting. And so, I didn't know that. Yeah, very, very interesting, right? Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, you'll see this is just a very, even if it's not a dog park, a lot of parks allow off leash between the hours of 9 p.m. and 9 a.m. Yeah. So owners kind of use that time to socialize, you know, and just let dogs kind of have a royal rumble. And then in between that, it's just usually a few walks and stuff. And I'm giving you just the average
I understand.
Dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. But of course, there's exceptions to this. But that has been my experience with a majority of dogs in the city. There is a lot of need for that, but it's more in kind of like imperfect situations, it sounds like. So how do you navigate that from the standpoint of like, we obviously, because you know, to the contrary, everybody has backyards and different types of environments they could socialize their dog in. You have a lot more control over the environments you're doing it in. And obviously we know with a lot of dog aggression issues, a lot of the issue stems from the environment that they're in, less so with the individual dog. So how do you navigate if you have a dog that has
serious aggression issues, or maybe not serious aggression issues, right? They're more selective or particular about the environments that they socialize in. And that's the only way you have of doing it, where you have a lot less control over the things going on around you.
Hours. I mean, before I had my facility, especially, I was working around the hours that I knew I would get the most peace.
That's a good point.
I meant going at 5, 6 in the morning to really work a dog, and then hitting up someone that I know that has a stable dog. And I mean, eventually, right, my dog, once he became around 2.5 years old, became my go-to in terms of, he was extremely stable, extremely, I mean, I did good with him, but at the same time, I think he was just also an excellent dog. Genetically, he was very strong, very stable. And so for me, that was a huge plus, having him. And it was just kind of managing when and where you go. Yeah. If I see a park and I see there's dogs in there, I would always kind of scope it out for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, see what the dogs are like. Sure. And then if I was like, okay, I could rock with this kind of crowd, I would go in and work with this dog, whether anxious, whether aggressive, whatever, in dog parks. I personally am a fan of dog parks. I think that it's a great place to prove training. It's a great place to introduce a certain level of stress and still work with your dog. I'm not a fan of dog parks when they're used in a way where it's just owners are not paying attention on their phone, whatever. That's different. But there's different parks, different vibes, different crowds. I know a few places, like off the bat right now, I'm not going to name names, but I know if I go to certain parks, I know that I'm going to see a pretty regular group of people that are very responsible, that kind of know what's up. 100%. I know if I go to certain other parks, it's a shit show. And so you kind of get the crowds, and at the same time, different hours will bring you different results in different environments.
Yeah, for sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's obviously the obvious that I didn't even think about is you do have to just be aware of like times and stuff like that. And, same deal around here. Like Cleveland has like general leash laws. Obviously, there's not really a whole lot of places you could just let your dog off leash, but there are certain places that obviously they don't care about that. And some of them for good or for bad, in some cases, it's just a glorified dog park of a bunch of irresponsible owners that let their dogs run up on every person that they see. And then other places, there's 1 or 2 people. They're very responsible about things, and you could feel safe letting your dog in that area to go do their thing. So that makes a lot of sense. So
yeah. I think there's also I think public officials, parks, police or whatever, also kind of get it in the city. Like there is, as long as it's not a little too much, even when off leash is not allowed, they're not going to bother people too much. And again, this also depends on areas. Certain areas, you're going to get that ticket. Certain areas, they're like, whatever. It's just, you got to kind of be aware of what's going on. And if you do, I think that a lot of owners have a lot of really cool public resources available to them out here as dog owners.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think the big difference is dog parks here are more of a luxury than a necessity.
Good point.
For that's kind of the only place you have there, and so people know they have to be more responsible. Where here it's like, oh, I have the backyard, but I could take Rufus to this dog park and let him go have fun because it's a luxury.
It's also become kind of like a status symbol too. Like there are some dog parks in the area around here that are like the cool dog park, that like everybody goes and hangs out at, and if you can't be a part of that like in crowd, like you're fucked.
That's interesting.
It's so interesting when I talk to people that are like in different types of areas like this where it's so gegeographically different, because these are points that I don't typically even think of, obviously, but you're totally right about it.
Yeah, but it makes sense that people would even hold each other more accountable there. Like I said, because it's a necessity. Like I have to take my dog here, at this hour before I go to work, and we all want to have a good time, solid time, not have any dog fight before I have to go work 9 hours,
Yeah, exactly.
100%. Hell yeah. Okay. So I want to get into, obviously, ways of socializing and stuff like that a little bit. I'd like to jump into, obviously, what you had originally mentioned about the video that we had posted and discuss that case a little bit. Just because I completely get where you're coming from with it a lot. There's just a lot more context to that particular situation that obviously clarifies it and stuff. So we can get right into that kind of stuff. So obviously the reason why we connected. So how did you find that video? It was a sponsored post. Did it just pop up in your feed or?
Exactly. I think it was just I think it just popped up as an ad.
Yeah, for sure.
Saw it. And then after seeing it, I think the first thing that I did was just go to your page, check out your stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm not a big fan. Like you said, there's always a lot of context behind things. So sure. I'm not a big fan of just going and commenting on shit. So, but I did have obviously thoughts, and that's why I DM'd you. I was like, "Yo, so this is what I think about the situation."
Sure. And listen, you can finish. Go ahead.
No. I was pretty wrapped up, but that's how I came across it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and listen, I get it. Like, obviously, anytime you see a situation, especially in today's dog climate, like videos like that are overdone to an extent. People are purposely putting dogs in situations that are like extremely unsafe for the sake of getting a good before and after video, right? And, I'm the first one to agree with you from the standpoint of like a lot of the trainers out there that I see doing that. I do think it's very unsafe. I don't think there's a whole lot of thought that goes into it. I do think it's a lot more intentional from the standpoint of look at this dramatic thing that's happening and all that kind of stuff. But basically the backstory on that dog. So I think he's like 3 years old or something like that. He had been social pretty much his whole life until he was about 2 years old, somewhere around there. He got attacked really badly at a dog park, like emergency vet visit. Dude got like pretty fucked up by another dog. And it was like a light switch. Like as soon as that happened, like immediately extremely dog reactive, immediately could not socialize him anymore with other dogs. Pretty much would display anything that you saw, obviously, in that intro clip anytime she would try to do it, obviously. But he had never injured another dog after that incident. But a lot of that just had to do with the fact that she hadn't really put him in very many situations once she saw it happening, right? So I have... at the time, I had 5 trainers working under me at the facility, and he was a dog that I absorbed from one of my trainers that left, who he was like maybe like a week into the program or so. He had done an extensive amount of obedience training at that point. He actually did a board and train with another trainer before that, another local trainer who's primarily like just an e-collar trainer. And she had done a little bit of socialization and stuff with him up until that point. He actually did do a little bit of on muzzle socialization, and pretty much the extent of all of it was we would put him in the group with other dogs, and he would pretty much growl at anybody that came near him. He would snap at anybody that came near him, and he never really had much of an inkling to pursue anybody or anything like that. It was just get the fuck out of my face kind of thing, Now, the video in particular, so the initial before clip was the first time that I socialized him myself after I absorbed him from her. I'd done quite a bit of just general training to see where he was at with like his neutrality around other dogs. He wasn't really reacting anymore or anything like that. We had a pretty solid control over him. And a lot of times when I see some dogs that are kind of in a finicky place where it seems like it's just like a lot of noise and a lot of like snapping, but not a whole lot of commitment or anything like that behind them. There have been some cases I've seen that the muzzle in itself just creates a level of frustration and stress that like basically inhibits the dog's ability to like get completely past that issue. So because we hadn't seen much of a previous issue with him up until that point, as far as, like I said, a whole ton of like true commitment or anything like that, and because we had kind of done an extensive process of training with him, I knew his sensitivity levels to the e-collar. I knew the degree of control I had over kind of getting him to kind of de-escalate if I needed to. We obviously, in that particular video, there were 3 people in the room. We had, obviously the e-collar on him, kind of prepped to be able to kind of emergency brake it if we needed to. I think our other trainer had a riding crop to be able to address the situation if we needed to. I felt pretty darn confident popping that muzzle off, and if something were going to pop off, we would be able to de-escalate it before anything happened. Every one of those dogs that we used in that situation, I know one of your questions you had is like, were they your personal dogs? So no, they were clients' dogs, but they were clients' dogs that had been through programs like years back. We have very, very good relationships with them. We're very, very open with our clients about how we use their dogs when they're with us, how we use them to kind of test other dogs. Like we're kind of discussing, like before we put any dog in a situation like that, I'm going to kind of pre-vet the situation as far as, am I minimizing the risk as much as I can? And listen, like we know there's no 100% risk mitigation when it comes to working with aggression, right? In the end of the day, anything can happen. Any dog can kind of pop off. Any one of those dogs, even though, like I said, we've known them for a very long time and we've never had any issues with them, any one of them could take something personally and it could turn into an altercation or something. But the chances of that happening, I determined were fairly low. And if it were to happen, I felt we were in as best of a position to be able to stop it and address it as we needed to, right? So we put him in that scenario. We started... we put him in the room. It pretty much started with some of the clips of he just like would park himself and he put himself into a down and would just growl and snap at anybody that came by, right? Whatever. He did that a couple of times. He proceeded to then get up and start walking around a little bit, which was the first time that we had ever seen him do that. He started kind of sniffing a little bit and actually going to engage with the other dogs. But then once he did that, it turned into he would sniff, but then if the dog would turn around and sniff back, then he would start snapping again, right? And then it hit the point where like the climax of that like before clip when he was like that German Shepherd, they were kind of going at it for a second there. That's kind of when we pulled the plug on it. And I kind of determined, okay, so the muzzle is creating more stress because the fact that he got up and actually started interacting, like we hadn't seen that at all in the week leading to it. And I think he felt a little bit more comfortable, but that presented a new set of issues because he was putting himself into more vulnerable positions, right? Which then started to become less safe at that point, which is why we pulled the plug on it. And then moving forward, we did do all of the socialization work with him on muzzle until we got him to a place where he kind of unlocked a little bit more and would get up and start sniffing with the dogs, which truthfully happened like 1 or 2 sessions after that I worked with him.
Talking about with the muzzle?
Yeah.
About all this.
Yeah, so after that initial clip, so the reason why we even got that clip, so I do a vlog series every other day. We post a vlog where I have another media girl that works at the facility that basically follows me around with a camera all day and films everything, right? So we were able to luckily catch that entire session, which we actually have the whole session filmed on YouTube from that clip particularly. But yeah, so after that, like I said, we were able to then put the muzzle back on. And I think the fact that we got him to unlock a little bit more in that session helped him at least realize that was an option once we put the muzzle back on, which same deal. He still did all the snapping and stuff like that, but it was less consistent from the standpoint of just anytime a dog comes near him, snap, to he would interact a little bit more. And then once it hit a point where it just bottled up past his threshold, he would start snapping again. And then we just kind of continued to see that process go, fewer and further in between, where he would sniff more. He would allow more sniffing before he started snapping. And I remember one evening and this was one, I don't remember which after clip we used in that sponsor post, but it was with a husky. We let him out with 2 other dogs, and on muzzle, we let him in, and it was just like he got it. Like he walked in and just tail was up. He was pumped. He ran over to the husky. He was really excited. They were like looking like they were kind of doing their little fucking play shit, right? And we're like, all right, let's pop this muzzle off again. We popped it off. He started playing with her, and literally it was like the switch flicked again. Like from that point on, I think he had like a week and a half left in his stay with us. We did not have a single other snapping incident with him with any other dogs. Every time we would let him in with a group, it was just like, he's like, I got it.
We're all good.
And it's interesting because like we could interpret all day long, what was the turning point for him? Like, how did he ultimately get past it? I'm a big believer that with socialization in particular, like nobody really knows. Like we can't get that deep inside of a dog's brain as far as like how they're kind of computing and processing that kind of stuff. We could only watch it happen a lot of times, figure out the similarities, and begin to interpret those messages that are being sent between them. You know what I mean? And that's like get into like passions and dog training and stuff like that at this point. Over the last couple of years, like that truly has become my passion, is figuring out and deeply understanding that social side of things as best as I can. And here's the thing, and this will be the last thing that I say on this, and I'll let you kind of jump in. Because I would say, at least looking at the trainers in our area, right? We got a lot of trainers in Cleveland, and I know most of them, I would say. At least within the realm of the trainers in our area, there is nobody that's doing the kind of socialization that we're doing right now, or able to get some of those breakthroughs that we're able to get with some of these dogs. And I think that we do catch a lot of flack for it sometimes, because from the outside looking in, we're pushing the envelope past what most trainers are comfortable with. You know what I mean? And are there risks associated with that? 100%, right? I'm 100% with you on that. I do think that there is an added degree of risk involved in that, and I am running that risk of, sure, something could realistically happen, but I don't think I'm so naive to that I'm not really evaluating those individual situations before I put the dog into that scenario, to at least have as many of the possibilities checked off in my head of, this is how I would handle this if this happened, this is how I would handle this if this happened, et cetera, So that's kind of how I look at that kind of stuff, and that's a little bit of the backstory and kind of how that progressed with that individual dog.
Gotcha. That's good to know. How long was this? I'm assuming it was a board and train, obviously.
Yeah.
How long was this board and train program with you?
It was just, I think he did 4 weeks with us.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
And during the 4 weeks, all of the dogs that group that you're talking about, the Husky, the Shepherd, it was a consistent group throughout?
No, it changed pretty much every time. We have a rotating group of, obviously, so we do boarding, we do board and train, we do daycare, stuff like that. So we have, at any given time, access to, sometimes like right now, I think we have 47 or 48 dogs at the facility right now. So we've got a pretty large a group, and I purposely try to mix it up as best as I can, because I don't want, I want them to develop relationships with certain dogs, and I think that could definitely help them. But I think that sometimes, like with some trainers, if they only have access to one or two dogs, your dog, or, a dog that has aggression issues could fit into that mold, and over the course of 4 weeks become kind of a part of that pack. But it doesn't address the actual problem, which is when they meet new personalities or new temperaments or whatever it is with dogs, they're not able to kind of get past it with the new ones,
100%. And so then my I guess my last important question for me before I kind of chime in is, what was the goal coming in for both the client and for yourself? What was the goal for this dog? Yeah. And what's his name, by the way?
Benny.
Benny, got it. Benny. What was the goal for Benny?
So Benny's major goal was, one, she wanted to be able to improve on his social skills, right? So anytime somebody contacts me that has a dog with aggression issues, the goal will never be, this dog is going to just be able to be a social butterfly and go out and play with every other dog and go to the dog parks and go to all these different places. But, there are some scenarios where we want to be able to allow our dog to interact in a more confident way with their surroundings, right? And I think every dog can benefit from a little bit better socialization. You know what I mean? So she's got like a couple of friends that she has that have dogs that she goes for walks all the time with, that she wanted to at least know that she knew how to understand her dog if she were to introduce him to them in a safe manner, obviously. And she also had I don't remember if it was a roommate or a significant other or something, who had a dog that was going to be moving into her apartment with her, that she wanted to be able to slow introduce him to. So those were kind of the major goals with it, is she just wanted her dog not to be so terrified around other dogs, So that was kind of my big goal with it, is, can we give this dog a social outlet, right? That doesn't mean that even necessarily she's going to be doing it all the time at home, but can we give this dog a social outlet to continue improving on his skills and interacting?
Got it. it's a very interesting approach that you're kind of describing here, and I think that one, I'll start out by saying that the safeguards you have in place are awesome. Like, it is one of the things that when we say, we don't have the full context or picture, like these things that you're describing to me now, you don't see,
sure.
Right?
Oh yeah, of course.
And so that definitely, on my end of things, I would still do things a little differently, and I'll go into how.
Sure.
But the safeguards you're talking about are important, and I think make a lot of sense for what you're doing and how you're approaching it. The second thing I want to say is, and this is like a quote by Bart Bellon, but there's 1,000 roads to Rome, right? And so I definitely think that it's important for us to kind of lay out that one trainer might do things a little differently from another. Doesn't mean that either approach is necessarily wrong or right. And I do believe in there being. I'm not the kind of guy that believes in there are no rights and wrongs, but there's a lot of right ways to do things and a lot of wrong ways to do things. So the approach that you're describing right now sounds definitely like you've mitigated a lot of risks. I myself am a trainer that I think on the spectrum of how much do you kind of let dogs take chances. I would say I'm on a similar scale to you, where I do take more risks than some other trainers might, but I try to mitigate it, like you say.
Your video disappeared.
I'm getting a call, and I'm trying to end it, but the options are end and accept or hold and accept.
Uh-oh.
And or send the voicemail. I'll do that.
There we go.
Am I back?
Yep.
Yeah, you're there. You go.
All right. Anyway, so that said, right, and this is kind of okay. Cool. When I deal with cases like this, and you told me, okay, this dog has been social his whole life. I think you said he was 3 years old.
Yeah.
And he got attacked, right, and then kind of just became hyper defensive against any kind of dog, any kind of approach. In my experience, like, you're right that these kinds of dogs generally do not, and it also depends on the dog, but generally do not try to go on the offense.
Yeah.
Right.
They're not seeking out the conflict necessarily. They're just reacting accordingly. Yeah.
Exactly. And I have seen a couple of dogs that do end up, really becoming offensively aggressive. Like, they become their defense is offense, but that said, right, I think that for me, one of the biggest things that I try to do when I have a case like this is give the dog more support. And from the social aspect of things, and this is going to be an interesting conversation, I think, because this is what you focus on so much.
Sure.
But from the social aspect of things, right, for me is the most important is the relationship of the human and the dog.
Sure.
And the sense of security that the dog feels, and where that sense of security comes from. Does it come from an accurate interpretation of what other animals and other dogs in that environment, or even the environment itself, is presenting, right? Or does that sense of security come from a sense of confidence that the dog has based on its own situation and who it feels like it can depend on, and what it can do to escape pressure, what it can do to alleviate stress, and how it can go about doing those things, right? And so I, for the most part, try to provide that dog a sense of security through me, and through
advocation, or are you talking typically through like advocation and stuff?
Good question. Absolutely. Advocation is a very big one. And particularly because when a dog does get defensive, the most important thing in the early stages is, at least for me, I should say, the most important thing for me in the early stages of training that dog is to show that dog that it does not need to handle that situation independently, right? And that it can depend on the human there to advocate for it and to protect its security. From there, right, my secondary goal is trying to develop an internal confidence with that dog, right? Bringing actually something that its mind can focus on, right? Other than, okay, there's a dog there, there's a noise, there's this, whatever the triggers may be, trying to kind of hijack the mind's priority and kind of reorganize, all right, what is at the foremost of your attention, and then, having everything else come next. I do this, and you've gone through my page, so you kind of get a sense of this already, but I do this primarily through play, right? And having the dog get engaged in games that can kind of consume its focus and its energy, and then slowly filtering in stress, right? That said, how do the social aspect of things, right? Once I have a dog that can turn to me for its problems, and that understands that it will have backup per se from me in any situation where it feels like there is a sense of threat to its security, right? I rely on definitely both my physical presence in that situation, but also the conditioning of whether it's like the conditioning of the environment, the conditioning of pressure, and certain responses to pressure. So like earlier, we were actually joking around like, yes, and then what, right? Like for me, I condition 2 reward markers, right? Particularly so that the dog has an exact understanding of what follows when I give that reward marker. I have my yes and I have my go get it, with the difference being where that reward is coming from, right? And I do this because when I give, and once I've conditioned the dog to understand, okay, yes means you're coming to me specifically, not any other source of reward, but you're coming to me and you can expect good things, right? In any situation, right, where I see that tension and stress is building, right, I try to have the dog not just recall, not just come as like an obedience command, but have the dog understand, hey, I want you to come over here for something good that's about to happen. And at the same time, as I'm doing that, show it that it's not alone in handling these situations. I think that for me, I have seen a tremendous amount of success with anxious, nervous dogs that display aggression, because in reality, that dog Benny is not aggressive, right? From everything I'm hearing, but for dogs that kind of have these kinds of reactions, right? I really want the dog to take a step back, and rather than having to overcome their fears through kind of realizing that nothing will happen, because I think with that kind of approach where you are with a lot of safeguards, right, you are allowing the dog to kind of figure out what the consequences of being in this kind of environment, social environment with these kinds of dogs, what their reactions are like, etc. is. And it's ultimately the dog figuring out independently, all right, nothing is going to happen, right? This fear that I have is essentially irrational. Like I've seen repeated cases of the dog coming near me. Okay, they'll even respect, my signs to them that I'm not uncomfortable, right? But through repeated, interactions, you're kind of relying on the dog to figure out, all right, this is okay, right? And I think that, and I've taken similar approaches, and I still do in certain cases. It's an excellent way to show the dog that there is no real threat that they should kind of be afraid of. But I think it's very, very reliant on the dog figuring it out. And for me, it's just, I think that, my initial concerns when I DM'd you was just pure safety, right? It was purely like, okay, this dog is not muzzled. And there's a lot of this. I mean, I counted at least, I think there was like 2 or 3 that I saw in the video, dogs moving around. And I was like, And I didn't even know, like, I was like, is the trainer like filming while these dogs are kind of doing it? I was
no, I got you.
You know, so that aside, because obviously those concerns are not the same concerns. I mean, those concerns are moot.
Yeah.
But you know, in terms of just how
the process.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. In terms of the process, right? For me, it's still about giving this dog confidence and security and doing it in an efficient manner. And 4 weeks, to be fair, is also
not that long of a time.
It's very, very
no. I agree. Yeah.
And to find success in that time is also a huge accomplishment, right? Mm-hmm. It depends on both the dog's resiliency, right? Mm-hmm. And how deeply scarred that dog was, and also what the owner did following that incident and how the owner handled kind of actions moving forward. Like, there's a lot of factors involved. Mm-hmm. But for me, like, I mean, I have a dog right now that actually kind of fits the exact same bill. Mm-hmm. Literally, I think literally 3 years and change, social dog, happy dog, got attacked by a pit bull. I probably shouldn't have even said that because the breed is not what matters. But got attacked, you know, and then completely shut down. And he's a bull terrier. Yeah, this dog. Mm-hmm. You know, they're not even the most dog friendly dogs in the beginning. Yeah, but I mean, like, this dog just completely shut down. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if it's a Chihuahua, and he's with me right now. He's actually in the back corner of my house, place right now. You know. But he's with me for 2 months, and you know, the already the difference is significant in his ability to kind of come out. And so I deal with kind of these cases, and for me, I think what I find a lot of success with is showing the dog that they don't have to figure it out. Mm-hmm. Right? That they will get led to understanding what I want them to see. And that's that I don't need you to go and, like you said, be a social butterfly and do jumping jacks with whatever dog you randomly meet. Mm-hmm. But I want, for me, what that socialization, what that recovery and rehabilitation looks like is first and foremost getting neutrality, right? Sure. Getting neutrality, meaning having a dog that isn't going under immense stress when they see a dog or when they hear a dog or when a dog approaches, right? Having a dog that doesn't go into the fight or flight mode when they interact with another human or dog or whatever, or when they hear certain noises, and can actually function and take guidance from me. And insofar as I can give guidance to this dog, right, and I can capture their mind and attention, I can then progress steadily to, okay, now I can ask for more independence from you, right? Now that you understand that you have backup, that you have security and guidance where you need it, and you're not trying to troubleshoot, hey, is this dog trying to do things or is this dog not, right? And in terms of advocation and what that looks like, even that starts getting faded out slightly, right? I go in the beginning from where the moment I see the dog tensing up, I place myself in between the dog and him, and really just, I don't even care about that. I act like the other dog's not there. I'm just trying to engage that dog, right, through little games. I try to make obedience a part of these games, right? You know, as I play whatever it is, tug of war, fetch, like food games, right? Treat chasing, etc., whatever it may be, I incorporate obedience so that they see it as a chance to unlock this fun activity with me, and I try to get them engaged. As we go further along on the training program, right, I reduce that more and more and let them handle a little more stress on their own before reinserting myself back into the picture and getting them engaged with me again. I give them shots of this stress from other animals, from other triggers, until they get to the point where you see the dog making the decision to create more space and independence from you, right? And to check things out. And insofar as, you know, the environment and the other dogs I have available are what I want it to be, I allow that, you know? And so that's the kind of, I think, the biggest difference in approach. And with regards to the muzzle, I I find that you're right with muzzle adding a lot of stress and frustration because the dog typically feels even more insecure, right? They have less power when they have this muzzle on. And so there's a whole process that I go through. I do a lot of muzzle games. I do a lot of habituation with the equipment before I even get to that, to where I'm introducing dogs with the dog muzzled. But you know, I think that if I don't have the dog muzzled and I'm letting other dogs in the same space and stuff, my approach just looks a little bit different. Sure. And I hope that kind of makes sense so far.
Yeah. And I think you clarify. So I got a couple key points here that I wrote down that you were talking about. But in the end of the day, like I said, like you were saying, like, you know, whichever way you go about doing it, it's probably, you know, like yours is obviously going to get the same results because you're still getting to that same end place. And at the end, when you kind of described with the ad, because I was, as far as the advocation is concerned and stuff, I'll talk about that for a minute. But, you know, post the advocation, you still do put the dog in a position where they do need to figure out that interaction side of things. The real conversation is just a matter of like, how quickly do we move to that place? And then how much fallout is there if we sidestep some of the advocation side of things? Because when I first started getting into socialization, like, again, like when you look at like a lot of the people that were doing big time socialization 6 years ago, 7 years ago, stuff like that, your Chad Mackins, your, again, Tyler's, Blake's was big on a lot of socialization and stuff. And a lot of it was like heavily micromanager environment, right? Heavily, like you start noticing this dog stressed over here, show them that you're there to handle the situation, right? You start seeing this dog stressed over here, advocate and split it up or whatever it may be, right? And I followed that approach for a very, very long time, right? It was one of those things. And here's the thing. I was able to successfully manage large groups of dogs pretty well. And if you look at like a lot of, you know, we used to do a lot of like large group socialization and stuff like that. When you look at a lot of large group socialization or how a lot of doggy daycares are run and things like that, it's you almost have to do that because there's too many different variables all the time going on where you can't allow them to individually figure out all of their problems, right? We've taken a lot different of an approach to socialization lately because I've seen almost a dependency that the dogs develop on that. And then when you do ultimately put them in the position where they're needing to figure it out on their own, they're needing to address these problems on their own or whatever it may be, I haven't seen a strong enough preparation that we've given the dog where it's that much less intense than if we just jumped right into it and let them do it. And what I kind of mean by that is let's take something that is a big, whatever, controversial point for a lot of dog trainers, like humping, right? So dogs humping each other, right? In a lot of cases, humping is something that trainers have this like black and white rule of like they see humping, they shut it down immediately as soon as they see it because it's this whatever display of dominance and it's pushy towards the other dog. And what if the other dog doesn't like it and this and that? And I always say, you know, as I've done more of the socialization, like we're kind of describing here right now, if I notice a dog is humping another dog, let's say the dog that is being humped turns around and just fucking lights the other dog up and goes after him and attacks him and this and that. A lot of people would look at that scenario and be like, well, it's because you didn't stop the humping, you know? And I look at it completely opposite. I look at it as a problem with the other dog of having essentially a completely inappropriate response to communicating with another 100%. Dog that they don't like something, right? So we could do all the preparation all day long, but we still need to teach them that point right there. And, you know, like what's the harm so much in allowing them to figure that out sooner rather than later? Because in the end of the day, these dogs need to learn the process of communicating with each other, right? It's not so much, I feel like the idea with advocation is that we're going to make it a lot like an on-off switch, right? And we're going to turn off the aggression so that, you know, the dog can tolerate the stress better and not have a dramatic response to it. And when they're stressed, like the age-old saying of like, we're going to teach our dog to look to us when they're stressed as opposed to react aggressively, where I don't want to get a dog to not communicate when they're uncomfortable with things. I just want them to take it down a couple of notches. And by putting them in a place where they could do that, and when it hits a point where it's too intense, then I could step in and I can communicate a boundary with that. That, in my experience, has taught them to de-escalate that in a much quicker format to a place where, you know, 4 weeks is a short period of time. Sometimes we'll do 5-week board and trains with dogs like this. But pretty much any dog that has come to us with quote unquote dog aggression issues, whatever it may be, they're not fixed right by the end of it. You're not going to fix an issue like this. It doesn't work that way. But we've never run into a dog we couldn't give a really healthy social outlet to and have them be in a position where they are able to successfully play with other dogs under proper guidance. You know what I mean? So
yeah, totally. I think, and sorry to cut you.
No, you're fine.
I think what you just stated is 100% correct. Where I kind of add an asterisk to that point is on the dogs you're dealing with, right? On what the dog's experiences in past is, right? Because I agree, like you got to let dogs learn how to communicate. You have to let dogs develop that social skill. And the best way they do that is by interacting with one another, right? Yeah. Not by having you constantly micromanage what's going on. However, right? The kinds of dogs that I do that with are generally dogs that have not had a very, very traumatic experience or not recovering from something significant that has fucked them up in a serious way. A lot of dogs fit that bill, right? A lot of dogs fit that bill. A lot of dogs that I get, can be put under that kind of situation and jump right into social interactions and jump right into understanding, these are the things I can do. These are the things I can't do. And if they respond inappropriately, like you said, right? Yes, that's when you let the dog that's responding too intensely know, hey, this is too much. You don't do that, right? And so I agree with that point. But when I have a dog that comes in and he is dealing with significant trauma, right? The risk I run, right, is that one overcorrection by another dog could send him way deeper, right? And his ability to recover from a strong correction from a dog versus a strong correction from a human and its owner or whatever is vastly different, right? The ability of that dog to bounce back from certain oversights on a dog's part looks vastly different. Why? Because it's already scarred on that end.
When
right?
you say, okay, real
there's
quick.
Also dogs.
Hang on, real quick. I just want to get a follow-up point to that. So you said respond to an overcorrection from another dog, right? So just to be clear here, we're talking about dog comes in with aggression issues, whatever, right? We're putting them in a place where they're socializing. That dog that has the dog aggression issues has the severe trauma you're discussing, obviously. And then you're saying that dog is severely overcorrected by another dog? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So that's where I think we just get into knowing the types of dogs that you'd be doing it with, right?
Exactly.
So
That's
properly
exactly
vetting the one. So like we have a very strict process and like 3 categories we put dogs within, obviously, like that come into our care and stuff like that, where if I had a dog that I was concerned that would ever overcorrect a dog, right? Something that I would consider is inappropriate, I would never put that dog in a group with that dog.
I got you.
You know what I mean?
I totally got you. But the thing with that is that you can have very stable. Okay, my dog, for example, right? Remember I was telling you I use my dog. He's honestly my biggest tool because he's extremely stable. He's extremely mindful of size of dogs. However, overcorrection, and this is how I see it, is not really about. So just to clarify again, the dog that's correcting or overcorrecting the traumatized dog, right? They could be responding perfectly appropriately on an objective level, right? Like in a normal setting, like, okay, my dog gets humped, right? He'll turn around, he'll say, ah, and then he'll just keep moving about his day.
Sure.
Right? Nothing where he's escalating, he's not pursuing, he's not doing anything that's inappropriate. For me, that is a perfect response to that situation. However, that exact response that is appropriate, right? On an I put objective in quotation marks because it's situational, but that what I think is a good appropriate response to a traumatized dog may come as an overcorrection. That traumatized dog may take that, even though they weren't hurt by it physically, even though it lasted a split second and it was just a quick correction and the dog moved on, to that dog that already has come in traumatized and fearful, that small, tiny correction may be a big deal, right?
Sure.
And so
because they're not used to, they know, in the past it's become something so much bigger, right? So they immediately look at that like it is the something bigger, right? But that's kind of my point with this, is that we know that's not inappropriate. We know there's nothing scary about that, right? So allowing the dog to experience that moment. And let's say hypothetically, right? Let's say that scenario happens. The dog gets corrected by another dog, an appropriate correction, whatever, because they tried to mount them or this or that, right? And the dog is like, whoa, I'm just going to stay away from this dog for a little bit, and then goes and parks itself in a corner somewhere or something, right? That's not, in my opinion, the worst thing in the world, because they responded to that cue. The dog, in my experience, right, like what people really care about is not that when a dog corrects them, the dog is like, whoa, I just don't want anything to do with this, and I'm going to go put myself somewhere else. The problem is that when the dog gets corrected, they lash out and try to attack the dog, right, or things like that.
Yeah, for certain cases, yes, right, but like for certain cases, no. I get what you're saying, and I think on a deeper level, I agree. It's just about at what stage do I introduce that, right? It's at what stage do I want the dog learning these normal social cues, right? Because, for example, right, I mean, like, I'm going to make a parallel that I hope makes sense.
Sure.
But let's talk about puppyhood. Yeah. I just got a puppy. I just got a Maui. And this little motherfucker is 10 weeks old. I hope I'm allowed to swear.
Oh, you could swear.
This little dude, this 10-week-old dude is a monster, right? Yeah. And he's doing all sorts of just things that are just crazy, man. Biting my fucking hair. He's like going at my shoes and my clothes. And I really, like, yes, I can take access away from stuff. Like, I don't want to get into that rabbit hole, but, right? I don't correct him for any of this shit, right? At this age, I'm really letting him do whatever the fuck he wants. And in fact, there's also something similar that I heard about. Sent the voicemail. Got it. There's something similar that I heard about in Japanese culture, where they kind of let the kids do whatever the hell they want up until the age of 11, and then the corrections and the punishments and the strict kind of guidance comes. And I don't know if that's 100% true or not, but why do we do this, right? Why am I letting this puppy do whatever it wants? And people may have different approaches. I'm not saying what I'm doing is the Bible, but there is a stage that I think that I want my dog to get to before I start putting on brakes and teaching him boundaries and teaching him really like how to live in harmony with me. Is he doing a lot of things that I definitely am not going to accept later in life? Absolutely. Right. But at this stage of his life, all I care about is building him up. All I care about is making him confident enough to even engage. Right. And so like with this bull terrier that I have right now, it's so beautiful because I mean, he's been with me 3 weeks plus now. He's finally getting to the point where he's acting like a fucking bull terrier. He's going after my dog's heels, right? He'll start to jump and he'll body slam him a little and he'll hump him a little. And my dog wants to set boundaries. And my dog wants to tell him, hey, yo, right? But very, very quickly, I intervene. And I can send you, if you want, I can send you a clip after this is done. So because you can see footage of what I'm talking about and how I handle it, right? But I intervene and I make sure my dog does not correct him. Right? I make sure my dog does not, even though those corrections that he would be giving him are 100% appropriate and right. And to make sure that my dog is also not feeling frustrated, I give my dog a ball for him is like getting the best fucking, I don't know, whatever rewards you want to think of, So as I'm making my personal dog deal with this stress, I then let him offset it through me, right? I give him that ball. Yes, good job. And I let him really, okay, cool, fuck. This motherfucker is trying to nip at my heel. He's trying to hump me, but, I'm going to deal with it because I'm getting guidance from my owner to keep doing this. And with this bull terrier, right, at this stage, right, I have him for 8 weeks. 3 weeks in, at this stage, he's finally coming out of his shell. He's finally really, really starting to go hard. When I walk him down the street, a dog can bark. He's not trying to escape. Like I'm talking about, I told you, it doesn't matter, big dog, small dog, doesn't matter what. He was terrified of any dog, any noise from a dog. He would try to bolt his immediate response was run the opposite way. His response was never fight back, right? That was never his response. Yeah. And so I'm not, in this case, worried about this bull terrier biting my dog back, right? If my dog corrects him, he would do exactly what you just described. He would go to the corner and he would just sit there and be like, oh shit, right? I shouldn't have done that. And you're right. My dog is not going to escalate beyond that snap and enough, right? You know, they're both unfixed males too. Like, but I know for a fact, I've seen this bull terrier for the last 3 weeks, every day, working hella sessions with him. I know how he's going to respond. It's not going to be counter aggression, right? And I know how my dog is going to respond. But my goal is still to build this bull terrier's confidence up. I want this guy to just feel like, okay, you know what? I can really, really just start being like my old self again, right? Because every little correction that might come, every time my dog even gives a low grumble, I see the way his body language is. And his body language is anticipating that attack. His body language is tensing up like, oh shit, fuck, is it about to happen?
Sure.
And so I know he's not ready.
It's our job to make sure that doesn't happen, right? Which I agree. I think, and this is the thing, is I think we're agreeing pretty much on this, right? I think the thing is, like you're saying, like if the dog has severe trauma, they think they're going to get attacked by another dog, right? As long as we make sure that that reality doesn't happen, they're still going to figure it out. You know what I mean? And
sure.
You know what I mean?
I get what
so if he goes and parks himself in the corner because he thinks he's going to get attacked and he realizes, oh, wait, that didn't happen, right? So then he comes back out of his shell, and then the next time it happens, maybe he has a slightly less dramatic response to it, right? And then the next time it happens, maybe a slightly less dramatic response to it, which will help him learn that. So and then past that, looking at the individual dogs, so like one of my dogs, Deli, I talk about her all the time. She's a freaking weenie, right? Like she's a wimp, right? and she's the kind of dog that like if we are getting excited watching TV or something and start like raising our voices too much, she's like, ooh, and goes in like to the other room or something like that. It's just like built into her DNA. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So we could look at like advocation and stuff like that and like say that was happening with another dog, right? She was getting scared and going off or whatever it may be. We could look at that and handle that all day long, but it's still not, it's still not going to totally change that dog's personality. Because my goal here, again, looking at aggression or anxiety or whatever you want to call it, right? Any sort of those like social dilemmas dogs will put themselves into. I always look at it like a spectrum, right? If you have your aggressive behaviors or your anxious behaviors, and most of these dogs, if they have the trauma and are predicting X thing happening, their initial response to something that they could perceive as that is going to be level 10 on that spectrum, right? And I think it's fairly unavoidable that the first time we put them in that situation, you're going to see a pretty strong intense response of whether it's fear, whether it's aggression and aggressing out or reacting or whatever it may be, right? But then the next time, all I want to see is not that I eliminate it, but I want to see it at a level 9 the next time, right? And then the next time I see it at a level 8.
Quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How, and this is, you're right. I think we are agreeing on a lot. And I think the biggest thing that I'm still kind of, looking at things a little differently is on how quickly do you get your next opportunity, right? Because you're 100% right on that first time. Okay, it's at 10. But then when do you get your next opportunity to get that same kind of situation where the dog comes back, right? Yeah,
well, in most cases, in most cases of the aggression stuff that I'm seeing, it's either the dog is seeking out conflict and acting like just purely aggressively, right? Or it's the dog is hiding and seeking shelter and not engaging at all, right? And there's very infrequently what I find this in between where the dog is like comes in and they go and they sniff and they're engaged, but then a dog corrects them and then they're just like traumatized and like go hide in a corner or something like that. I find the opposite. You're talking like the human correcting versus the dog correcting. Back when we used to do a lot of advocation stuff, like there would be some dogs that just have these really hypersensitive personalities that, if you even like walk at them the wrong way or this or that, or tell another dog no or something, even in a non-emotional state, they will kind of read off of that, and they'll immediately shift that attention to us and be like, whoa, I'm not going to do anything wrong, but I'm just going to put myself in the corner, right? And in a lot of those cases, what we found, using another example of like, dog-on-dog socialization, obviously, we would find so many dogs. Josh, I'm sure you remember this when you like come to daycare and stuff. Some of these dogs that would go and just like hide in a corner, right? And, react or, you know what I mean? Like get like snarly when a dog would walk by or something like that. We used to do that. Like, hey, you don't have to do that. I'm going to step in and I'm going to create the space for you. But then I started realizing as I did smaller groups and allowed that stuff to play out without my interaction, and I watched the stable dogs and how they navigated those situations, it was ridiculous. Going back to like, we're just interpreting this kind of stuff and we don't really know. I would watch these dogs and it would just be like they were, the ones that I would look at like, oh, they're pushing that dog or they're bullying that dog or whatever it may be. It was like they had this like hyper intuitive sense of exactly what that dog needed to get out of their shell, right? Like it's like you would watch the dog hide in the corner and be scared. And if that dog was like rightfully scared, right, they would just kind of leave him alone. And they'd just be like, hey, like we're going to wait for you to kind of come out of your shell a little bit and do our own thing over here. And they would just kind of ignore them, right? But the second that dog started hitting a point where they started like looking like maybe I'm interested in engaging, but I'm still too scared and I'm still going to react when you come into my space, it's like those dogs, their attention would just immediately shift to that and sense that kind of like conflicted, unstable energy. And they would almost go and start pushing more and get the dog to almost like kind of start reacting and trying to create space. And they would push back just enough. And it would be like same deal, like a switch flicks and that dog would come out of its shell because the other dogs kind of forced them out of that shell a little bit. And they would start interacting and start playing. So as far as like, how frequent does it happen again the next time? It really just depends on the exact scenario. But I think all of those things are important lessons to learn because the number one problem I see people have when they're socializing their dog is they're trying to advocate too much. They're trying to micromanage too much. And listen, as professional trainers, we're going to be able to do this in a way that's 10,000 times more efficient than, your average owner would be. And also triple clarifying here, I have nothing wrong with the way you're doing, right? Like it's totally fine. Like that's an approach you absolutely can take with it. And you're still going to lead to the same route. My big conversation on it is, again, in the years that I've been doing this, I just haven't seen any fallout from jumping into that step quicker. And if anything, I've seen bigger and faster breakthroughs with dogs in allowing it to kind of work itself out a little bit more on its own. You know what I mean? So, I don't think we're going to find a total answer to this, obviously. And I don't think I'm going to be like, oh, you're right, or you're going to be like, I'm right. I just think that both ways are kind of accomplishing the same thing. And I don't see a lot of harm coming from the way we're doing it. And like I said, like in most cases, I'm seeing some of these dogs that just haven't ever been able to socialize, being able to not only coexist and interact a little bit with other dogs, but actually thrive with other dogs as they've lowered the intensity of their responses and build confidence in the fact that you can communicate, right? In Benny's case, you mentioned like, is reinforcing his fear aggression or something like that, right? I want him to be confident that you can communicate to another dog that you don't like something. Again, I just want you to take it down a couple notches, but understanding that it's on a spectrum, I know he's going to figure that out on his own, where he overcorrects a stable dog a little bit. It still accomplishes the same thing. You're right. It does kind of reinforce that behavior works, right? It does let him know that. But because it worked so easily, next time he's going to go into it with a little less intensity without the need of any intervention on my end. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I think that for a dog that is not genuinely aggressive,
sure,
that is 100% a feasible approach. Mm-hmm. Like I can see exactly why it would work.
Yeah.
And obviously it did work.
Yeah. And I agree with a dog that's more aggressive. Like if a dog is truly aggressive, like intent to do harm, seeking out conflict, stuff like that, you're getting a lot of calls. You're a busy guy.
Man.
So I agree with you. The dogs that truly are aggressive, there definitely is much more at the very beginning, me needing to step in and set those boundaries proactively. You know what I mean? But as soon as I've set the boundaries enough where I've got them to at least take it back a couple of notches to a point where that overcorrection is not so freaking intense that it's actually, truly actually trying to injure another dog or something like that, I still let them work through that process all the same. same, right? So yes, it's not like all the time, 100% of the time. It's like, just fucking go at it, figure it out, guys. You know what I mean? There definitely are the cases you have to step in and correct right away. But I think most people, and it sounds like you have a very level-headed approach about this past a lot of people, but a lot of the trainers that I talk to, their approach is step in for literally everything, right? Where it never allows the dog to get truly to that. You know, I know you said you want the dogs to get to that point of independence, but some trainers are going so extreme with it that they're never even letting them hit that point of independence. And then you get into a whole nother conversation. I have a lot of like quote unquote like unconventional views on like dogs that are fighting in the same household and stuff like that we recently did a whole podcast on because we had a really serious case of fighting dogs we just worked with. But that's what I find is the biggest hurdle for dogs fighting in the same house is we as trainers teach them to basically micromanage so much in the house that they live this life where the dogs never figure out and like squash their beef with each other. You know?
Sure.
So I don't know. You know, like I said,
I honestly, like I'm in a much more similar camp to you.
Yeah.
Than I think either of us realize. And in terms of fallout, like I will say this,
sure.
and you can take this how you want.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be even more kind of along the lines of exactly what you do now before than I am now.
Yeah.
And it was when I think I've had two in my 5.5 years of doing this professionally. I've had two genuinely aggressive dogs, right? I've had a shit ton of dogs that have aggressive behaviors. And generally when I talk about aggression, I do talk about it in the sense of behaviors, not traits, right? Because a lot of people really misunderstand aggression.
Sure. We talk about that a lot as well. We've got very serious opinions on that as well.
Yeah. And you know, like the reality is these two dogs I've learned a lot from, and one of them was where I experienced a genuine fallout. Where this dog was with me for 6 weeks, and this was at a time where I was very, very, very. I like to let dogs figure things out, you know, and with this dog, I really was doing a lot of not micromanaging, but a lot of close supervision because she had 7 dogs. She had a 7-dog bite history. You know, like this is a dog that if the owner was not so savvy, you know, the dog was getting put down.
Sure.
Yeah.
Luckily, the owners of the people who got bit were cool, and on a lot of situations, things just kind of played out in their favor. And I will say another compounding factor was that this dog is mixed with fucking a wolf. Her mother is a timber wolf Malamute mix.
Yeah.
And her dad was a pit bull.
Yeah. Ironically to that, there's a wolf sanctuary by us that does like high content, like wolf dogs, basically. So we've worked with a decent amount of those, and again, a whole another conversation. They are strange. Like they truly don't act like dogs. Like it's weird, you know?
And this is, again, this could have been, and this is one of those cases that I've thought a lot about.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
I've thought a lot about, and that is one of the compounding factors. Another compounding factor that I think with what I'm about to tell you was that the owner was present.
Sure.
Right. It was like, I'm telling you, we had like 6 weeks of incredible progress. Like this dog was playing with several different dogs. I was having group and again controlled group sessions. Yep. I have film and footage of everything.
Yeah.
Even the final, you know, the final thing that happened was, you know, with a dog that this dog had a relationship with, not even like a random dog, right?
Sure.
But with a dog that this dog had a relationship with. It took one correction the wrong way and just went at this dog.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was right there. Like it's not like we were completely, you know, it was me, another trainer was right there, the owner was there, you know, and it was over within 1.5 seconds, but within 1.5 seconds she had gotten a really good grip on this dog's head, like and the dog turned out okay and everything. But I think that with dogs that are truly have aggression traits that are genuinely like they have predatory aggression, they want to go and fuck other dogs up, I think that even as we kind of build their understanding of social norms and interactions and all of that, it's always in the benefit of the owner and the dog, I think, to be more on the side of advocation than more on the side of letting the dogs figure it out.
So just to the point of that, because obviously we know that the owner present creates a whole nother emotional hurdle, right? Between animals. I mean, like, it's like every time we do a board and train send home lesson, right? The first time the dog sees the owner again, it's like the most uncontrolled, at least in some cases, some dogs don't give a fuck, obviously. But in most cases, it's like the most uncontrollable sporadic energy that you've ever experienced with that dog. You know what I mean?
Right.
So Benny, for example, right? And we actually have video of this because we filmed it on one of our vlogs. So in the send home lesson, we focused on, don't worry about socialization right now. Just focus on reworking with your dog, reestablishing your working relationship with your dog, stuff like that. In our 1 week follow-up that was the first time we ever socialized Benny with the owner present. And because I know that that's the dog's complete energy changes in the presence of the owner, and things that you would have never experienced within the dog being in your care or anything like that, can begin to happen in those situations. We went back to square one with this socialization, and that first follow-up we did with her, it was like the first day we ever socialized Benny again. Like, all those behaviors came out again, right? Like, he did 100% of them, right? And, same deal. We had to essentially, I would say, like with the send home process or teaching owners how to do that. It's funny. I made an Instagram story talking about this exact thing yesterday. In these types of situations, our job is to show what's capable of the dog, right? Without the owner present, without the variable of, we're not denying that the owner's relationship with the dog has a massive, massive impact on the overall success of this situation, and the overall success of if their relationship, the disconnect they have is more powerful than the relationship I've developed with the dog in 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it is, it's going to override the relationship that I've developed with that dog in that moment until we start to get that under control. You know what I mean? So I want to show what's capable of the dog when you're not present, so you could understand the flaws in your relationship with your dog, so you could then accomplish the same thing. Right? So in that situation, again, I don't know the context as far as if it was a follow-up lesson, if it was a send-home lesson, this, that, but I would almost expect that would happen. You know what I mean? Like, when the owner is present, because of all of those emotions kind of at play with those types of things, and expect that the owner is going to have to go through a similar progression of the dog learning how to do all of these things, whether social skills or obedience related skills, in the same way that I needed to do it once that dog goes home, if it's going to be successful. You know what I mean?
Right. No, definitely. And I think that becomes an important thing to highlight in terms of what does that transition look like, right? And
you got to be strategic about it, for sure.
Yeah. From training a certain type of way to then, I guess, what does the owner take home, and then what do people understand as the appropriate way to interact with their dog, to maintain the capacity that the dog has unlocked or discovered during that training program or whatever.
And coming full circle to, like, again, all the points that we kind of have agreed on so far, this is where we get into when we're talking about doing the virtual sessions and everything. So much of this is teaching the owner how to replicate the relationship, because it's not about the training, right? It's about the overall view, relationship, and the way you're living with the animal as a whole, So 100%. One last point here that I think we both are going to totally agree on. When you get into, like, you were talking, like, really predatory aggressive dogs, right? Like, we've experienced our fair share of those as well. Like, there definitely are dogs out there that are on the very, very extreme spectrum of things that you will encounter as a trainer if you're doing behavioral modification work. And yes, they don't come around very often, but when you get one in, like, you know it, you know it. So, there are also some dogs that are, let's be very black and white about this, that are very, very limited as far as how far they will get with some of this kind of stuff, that will rely on basically just coexistence that will rely on very minimal, very, very, very supervised interactions with other dogs, that will always sometimes be done in a highly safe manner, that will always have to be on muzzle when they're doing it, et cetera, et cetera. Like, those dogs do exist. So I'm not saying that either of our approach is going to solve that kind of stuff. Like, most of the quote unquote aggressive dogs that we work with, they're not so inherently aggressive. They have some aggressive traits maybe, right? But they're not those like level 12 out of 10 dogs, right? Those are kind of a different conversation with a lot of this kind of stuff. Yeah. And those dogs, no matter what way you spin it, whether you're advocating, whether you're allowing them to work things out with, the ability to step in and intervene when it gets too much or whatever it may be, there will always be some micromanaging at play in order to keep those dogs safe. So,
yeah, I will say this too, like, in terms of, I think what I would label as micromanaging,
sure,
is also going to, I think, vary a little bit based on the owner and the dog.
Sure.
Right. Because there are, this is just, I think, a reality of things. There are people that, even as you develop their understanding of how to shape their relationship with the dog, and you develop their understanding of, okay, this is how your dog is thinking and operating, and this is what you need to do, right? Based on the dynamic of that team, right? Mm-hmm. Not even based on the dog's capacity or the dog's ability to perform or whatever, based on the dynamic of that team. I think that there are times where you have to kind of go one approach versus another, sure. Like where you can be a little more free flowing and kind of go like, okay, like this is how you want to shape your relationship and kind of take it that way versus, all right, you really have to constantly advocate for your dog, sure. Not because your dog can't do it, but I mean, just as much as we're trying to work with dogs, you nailed it on the head that you are also training people and their relationship with their dogs, or shaping their relationship with their dogs. And changing people's personalities isn't happening during the course of a 4-week board and train or during the course of whatever, right? You're not going to change who a person is like this, right? And so I think kind of considering the household that the dog is in is just as important as anything else we've discussed so far.
Sure. And to give you a lot of credit with what you're doing as far as a lot of the advocating stuff and things like that, because you don't have the luxury of controlling as many of the social interactions as we do in the type of setting of like, I could have somebody just not socialize their dog unless it's in a very particular way, where in your case, like we discussed at the beginning with dog parks and trying to find the best of the worst social groups and stuff like that. Because you don't have as much control of a lot of those outside variables, what you're doing makes a lot of sense as far as how you're coaching people through some of these types of things, And I could definitely see the benefit in understanding how to mitigate risk even further, because you may not know as well some of the other dogs that are there or the other people that are there, or you need to keep your dog out of maybe most of the group is good, but like you kind of want to keep your dog out of a little bit of a funk that's going on over here or whatever it may be. So I do completely see the benefit of the way that you're doing things as well in a lot of the context of situations that you're working with. So,
sure, definitely. Likewise.
So, listen, man, I won't keep you much longer. This wound up going a little longer than we thought, but I think this was a really awesome conversation. This will be live. I typically post it on Spotify right away, but we'll be posting like the video and everything on our channels Monday. So I'll send you over all the links and stuff when they're there. And like I said, I think this is a really great, productive conversation. I mean, there's a ton of topics I have written down here that maybe in the future we'll hop back on and kind of discuss, because I think this was really great. So hopefully you enjoyed it as well.
Likewise, it was a great conversation. Thank you both, David and Josh.
Yeah,
and I'll catch you guys hopefully another time.
Oh, yeah, where can everybody find you at? Anything you want people to know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. You find me on both. Kiba K9's letter K, number 9S on Instagram. I have a Facebook page for Kiba K9's as well, but I really post on just my personal Facebook, managing social media. I need a guy like you, Josh. I really need a media guy. Yeah. So if there's anyone out there, you can send in applications. But you can find me under Kirabel Johannes on Facebook, Kirubell, Johannes with a Y. Cool. And we'll see. We'll probably be expanding. People tell me, start a TikTok, start YouTube, start this. And man, social media is a fucking job on its own.
It's a lot, man. It's a lot.
Listen, man, just, I mean, because we've done a lot of reactions to these TikTok people and, you know, even some YouTube guys. And it's just like, honestly, there needs to be more people like you, because it's nice because, you know, like he said, we've tried to get people on that have, different opinions on things, and they don't want to like back their shit up. Basically, at the end of the day, like, and
it's not even about that. Like, we just like having conversations with people, like you can see
totally,
here, right?
Yeah. That's what I meant. Is because I mean, the community only gets better when you talk things out and like you figure, you know, the different ways that people go about things. And these people, you know, like you said, are kind of just throwing this dumbed down content that. I mean, me as not a trainer, I'm just like, I didn't learn shit from that, you know? Like, and if I'm saying that as a layman, you know, regular Joe Schmo, that's not good. So you should definitely look up into like doing some YouTube, some TikTok, something, because I mean, just talking to you, man, you got the spark, man. You got the spunk.
Appreciate you, bro.
Yeah, I was sitting here like, oh yeah, come on, let's go. You know? So
cool. Hell yeah, man. Well, like I said, I'll reach out to you at sometime in the next couple months. Maybe we can get you back on, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. We'll talk. You guys have a good rest of your day.
Yeah.
Have a good one, man.
Take care.
Dude, that was slick.
Yeah.
That was a great one.
That was a good one.
So hope everybody enjoyed that. It's the first podcast we've had with like an outside guest. It's our first virtual one. Hopefully we don't run any fucking hiccups with this and that it works out just fine.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed that. The world is our platform now. We can talk to fucking anybody.
Yeah.
So hope you guys enjoyed that. We'll tag all the links for his pages in the Spotify and the YouTube and all that good stuff. And if you guys have any questions or anything, we'll hit you up on the next one.
Yep.